In this video, we'll talk about the rhythm of language, which basically is talking about stress. So we talked a little bit before about how we could classify overall speech sounds into segmentals and segmentals. So how many segments a word would be divided into can be divided into vowels, which are single vowels and diphthongs, and then consonants. In this module, we'll talk about suprasegmentals, so things that you can do on top of, or layers that you can layer over top of the segmental phonology, the consonants and the vowels and the rules for which they combine. Segmentals can be divided into stress, which we'll talk about in this module, and then pitch, which we'll discuss in another one. So the content is to talk about the acoustic characteristics of stress syllables. We'll learn how stress placement is assigned in a language. We'll see how stress as a feature can be used to distinguish between phonemes or form a phonemic contrast, how stress is arranged into feet and into meter. So what is stress in a word? Stress in some languages is a factor of loudness or volume. So the unit of measurement would be amplitude, which is measured in decibels. So it would be like ba 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 ba, ba 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 ba, which just means more energy is coming out at a given wavelength, at a given bit of time. So it's actually louder. There's more decibels. In some languages, stress syllables are not made of louder or loudness, volume. They're made of length, so that stress syllables are longer vowels. This would be measured in milliseconds, not in decibels. So ba 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 ba, ba 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 ba. So the long one would be the stressed one. In other languages, the stressed syllable would be the higher one. So this would be frequency in hertz, it's pitch. So how many sound waves are happening per second, and what's the length between each of the sound waves? Would be ba 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 ba, ba 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 ba. So they've got a higher pitch for that stressed one in the middle. Now English actually uses all three. We use volume and length and pitch to emphasize the stressed syllables. So the stress-unstressed contrast in English is more pronounced than in almost any other language in the world that's widely spoken. So English learners are going to overplay or exaggerate the contrasts between stressed and unstressed syllables if they're learning another language. And learners of almost any other language will really struggle to make a really accurate distinction between unstressed and stressed syllables in English, on which the English language uniquely depends. So in English it would be ba 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 ba, ba 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 ba, ba 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 ba, where it's louder, longer, and higher pitched in the stressed syllable than the others. So if we think about stress as kind of loudness, but not just loudness, would involve pitch and a little bit of length. This word, which could be spelled with these 5 letters, has 2 possible pronunciations. The normal way to pronounce this would be begin, begin, where the first syllable is unstressed and the second syllable would be stressed, begin. But there was also a prime minister of Israel named Menachem Begin that would be the same 5 letters but would be pronounced different. And in that word, the stress is on the first syllable, begin, 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 begin. And I mark the syllable that's stressed by putting this little kind of apostrophe looking thing before the stressed syllable. And that becomes really important. Another way that we use stress to distinguish between meaning would be something like this. I know the answer. I know the answer. I know the answer. Versus I know the answer. I know the answer. The stress is on a different syllable, and that changes the interpretation. Here it's assumed to be the new information is that there is an answer at all. I know the answer. I know the answer to that question. I know the answer. This is now with the being stressed. It makes a claim that there's only one answer, and that one answer which exists is the one which I know. And so it's important for us to be able to mark the stress in the transcript. So a thing on the top, a little apostrophe before a syllable will be the primary stress. A one at the bottom would be the secondary stress. It's the second loudest syllable in a string. And then if a syllable is unstressed, there would be just a dot before it. This dot marks the syllable boundary, which becomes important for how we might pronounce the different sounds. How is stress assigned? How do speakers know which of the many syllables in a polysyllabic word is the one that should be stressed? Well, first you would need to divide the word up into the syllables in order to know where the syllable boundaries are. English has a tendency to always alternate between stressed and unstressed syllables. We like there to be at least one unstressed syllable between every stressed syllable. So something like banana, banana, unstressed, stressed, unstressed. Canada, Canada. Canadian, Canadian. Longitude, longitude. Longitudinal. So we've got a secondary stress on the lon. It's more than these other unstressed ones, but it's not as stressed as the two. Longitudinal. So this would be the primary stress, this would be the secondary stress. And then there's sometimes variants, depending on different dialects of a language, different variants of it, they'll stress words differently. There are people who say defy instead of defy. Defy instead of defy. In the largest city in Michigan, there's a real division between the people who pronounce it Detroit, Detroit, versus the people who pronounce it Detroit, Detroit. This is the original French stress pattern, Detroit, Detroit, which was kept by mostly the Caucasian population, Detroit, whereas then this applies more of a Native American English stress pattern to stress the first syllable, Detroit, Detroit. Police versus police. It's the same pattern. Police mimics the original French stressing of the second syllable, police, whereas police is more the Native American stress pattern for words which actually come from English originally, police, police. And sometimes this kind of stress contrast is used to even change the part of speech. Supposed, supposed, it's the supposed problem. That's a sign that's a participial adjective versus supposed, suppose. This is more like a past tense verb. So the grammatical function is actually marked by dividing the syllable up differently and then assigning stress based on that pattern. So again, the upper one means the primary stress, the loudest. The lower one is the secondary stress. This is important, again, for distinguishing between words, especially distinguishing between compounds. So like a light housekeeper, that might be a housekeeper who doesn't weigh very much. A lighthouse keeper would be someone who lives in a lighthouse and who watches over it. A crying baby sitter would be someone who sits or watches over crying babies. Crying baby sitter, so it's the baby that's crying. A crying babysitter, now it's a babysitter, and then that babysitter is crying. Here it's the little child who's doing the crying, and this one it's the adult who's doing the crying. So the stress assignment really matters for how we interpret compound words, and what's the sort of the head or the main idea, and what are sort of ideas that are more describing that main one. Some languages, stress placement is no big deal, and for a learner of this language, it starts to come as second nature. So in a language like French, if there's more than one syllable in a word, the stress will always be the last syllable. So aimer, donner, unique, confiance, échappe, perdition, éternel. In Czech, the syllable is the exact opposite, the stress assignment. In Czech, if there's more than one syllable, it'll always be on the first. Miloval, svého, jedinoho, syna, každý, neho, uvaži, unik, zachube, získal, věčný, život. Polish is a little bit more complicated, but again, it's a regular pattern, and so it becomes pretty easy for learners of Polish to eventually pick up on the pattern, even if they aren't able to consciously name it. So it's the second to the last syllable. So bowiem, it's because this is the first syllable, but it's more important that's the second to last, whereas umiwował, so wo is the second to last syllable, syna swego, jednorodzonego, aby każdy niego wierzy, zginął życie wieczne. So with a two-syllable word, you might think that the stress is always on the first, but when you get into these really long multi-syllable words, you start to realize, oh, the pattern is the second to the last. So if a Polish speaker were trying to learn English, On some words, they would be just fine, but on a lot of words, they would get it wrong. A word like mustard fits the Polish stress assignment pattern, the second to the last syllable, or economics, the second to the last. But they might say ekonomical, ekonomickie in Polish, right? So it would be the second to the last. So their pronunciation of the English word economical would be wrong because we stress the na, and a Pole would be used to stressing the second to the last, not the third to the last. So believe, no, it's believe. Conceive, it's conceive. Table, they would be just fine. Dividend, no, we say dividend. Abandon, they would be fine. Apprehend, they would be wrong. It's apprehend. Acrobat, acrobati. No, that it would be acrobat is how it is. So some words, their native pattern or their native way of pronouncing it would be just fine. Others, it would be off. A French speaker who always pronounced the last syllable as stress would be fine on a word like believe or conceive, but they might be not doing that well on acrobat instead of acrobat, or atlas instead of atlas, or atlas instead of atlas, Canada instead of Canada. And a Pole would say Canada, right? So they're all going to be different in terms of their stress assignment patterns. So you might have a hard time actually figuring out what is the stress pattern for English, and you're right. There is no clear pattern in English. It depends a lot on the nature of the vowels, whether it's a diphthong, whether it's lax, the history of the word that's being stressed. So English words, we have to really teach the stress the same way that we'd have to teach what sounds or what letter are appearing in a given new word. So in general, though, we can say that for the most part, for two-syllable words at least, especially two-syllable nouns, the stress is going to appear on the first syllable. So we're like valley, crikey, showman, Deborah, breather, shocking. Words that we've borrowed from French, though, it's interesting because British speakers of English and Americans will actually apply a different stress pattern. Americans are sort of equal opportunity adapters. They'll tend to take on the French patterns or take on the stress patterns as if words are borrowed from another language. So remember we said that French is always stressing the final syllable. So Americans are fine to say valet, crochet, chauffeur, debris, brioche, chanteuse, whereas British speakers or British borrowers of French words tend to apply their native English stress pattern to those borrowed French words to say valet or crochet or chauffeur or debris or brioche or chanteuse. So they're going to pronounce those words differently in the UK than they would in the United States because the US keeps the native French pattern, whereas Britain tends to apply its native English UK pattern, England pattern, to these borrowed words. And we saw that already with something like Detroit versus Detroit, where the whiter American populations would tend to adopt the French pattern, Detroit, whereas the other people would try to apply the sort of more native English pronunciation, Detroit, to it. So the Americans actually keep the original French stress as much as Americans sometimes like to tease the French. Stress can be phonemic. We've seen that many different things can be phonemic, which means one phonetic feature, one acoustic feature is used to distinguish the meaning between one word and another. So we saw that voicing can be phonemic. So in the French word boire, where b is voiced, boire, or boire, where the first thing is unvoiced, boire means to drink, poire means pear. And so that voicing contrast can be phonemic. We saw nasality can be phonemic. So chant is French for sing or song. Chat is French for cat. The only difference between the two is the nasalness of that vowel. Aspiration can be phonemic. We saw this like in English where Pete and beat are two different words. The first one is aspirated, Pete. The second one is unaspirated, beat. And the difference is a difference in aspiration. So stress can also be used to make a phonemic contrast, to change the meaning of a word. So Spanish, amo is I love, and amo would be he loved. So the vowels are the same, everything else is the same, it's just which syllable is stressed will change the meaning of the word. Ame would be I would love, ame is I loved. In Lithuanian, galba is language, galba means using language. Machina is car, machina is by car, migle is fog, migle, which we wouldn't say very often, but if you did, it would mean by means of the fog or using the fog. So actually putting the stress on the final syllable ends up giving you this meaning of using or by means of it. We're keeping the stress where it would normally be in that second to last syllable place, gives you sort of this normal noun. Feet is a term that you may have heard when we're talking about stress. So there's two kinds of feet. One where the first syllable of the two is stressed. Daddy, daddy. This is called a trochee or trochaic foot, where the first syllable is stressed. Attack, attack. This would be where the second syllable is the stressed one. This is called an iamb or an iambic foot. What are some other English words that are trochees or iambs? Can you think of any? Daddy, dada, dada. It's like butter, answer. Or iambs, those are rarer. Attack, construct, relieve. Those are iambs. Longer English words would have to be, if you've got more than two syllables, they're going to be made of more than one foot. So a foot is a grouping of these two syllables. It's like California, California. Is California made of two trochees or two iambs? We'll see dada, 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 dada. So we have one foot Cali, another foot Fornia, and so it's actually made of two trochees, two trochaic feet. And this tends to be the case for English, pseudo-microscopic, pseudo-microscopic. So it's trochee, 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 and then it's this last trochee which gets the main stress for the whole word, pseudo-microscopic. William Shakespeare was famous for not writing in trochees, which is sort of English's preference, but he worked really hard to make sure that he wrote in iambs. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Julia is the sun. So it's not perfect iambs, but he tries to use a lot more iambic phrasings. Mostly he did this by picking one syllable unstressed words to appear with one syllable stressed words in combination. And he played around with the word order of English sometimes in order to get that to work. So this is why we say he writes an iambic meter. So he tends to prefer starting out with an unstressed, followed by a stressed, then an unstressed, then a stressed. Stress can also determine which allophone of a phoneme we pronounce. So in many languages, a phoneme would have one allophone which is used in a stressed syllable, and a different allophone of that phoneme is used in an unstressed one. For example, in English, the phoneme e has an unstressed allophone or a stressed allophone, which is pronounced the way that it would be. So if this phoneme gets pronounced as when it's in an unstressed syllable. So in a word like electric, this would be the underlying phonemes of the word, but this first one is electric, electric, because it's unstressed, elect. But we can see electricity, electricity, now that this first syllable is stressed, electricity, 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 electricity. If you pronounce it with the stress on the first syllable, this vowel will be pronounced as an e, this one will be an There are speakers of English, though, who prefer electricity, 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 or electricity. And so depending on where the stress is, that will determine whether you pronounce the e version of this allophone, such as here, or the version of this allophone, which would be there. E also gets pronounced as I in an unstressed syllable. So a word like release, which the phonemes would be release if it's careful pronunciation. If I say it fast, it would be release, release. So r would be the more unstressed syllable here. Lease would be the stressed one. In stressed, I would pronounce it with this off glide. In the unstressed position, I would just pronounce it as a lax vowel, release. In Russian, every vowel phoneme actually has a pretty complex system of pronunciations that depends a lot on stressed. In a stressed vowel, for example, this phoneme a would be pronounced as a, unless it's between palatalized consonant like pyat, would actually be pronounced pyat, pyat. It's more like an a. But in an unstressed syllable, a would get reduced to or a would get reduced to I if it's neighboring a palatal consonant. A gets normally pronounced as an in stressed syllables, But that will sometimes get reduced to an I or an depending on the neighboring consonants in an unstressed. And the most famous rule for Russian is that O always becomes A if it's unstressed. So you don't say говорю, which would be a southern accent in Russian that doesn't have that word. You say говорю, говорю. So those O's, говорю, become an A, говорю, because the stress is on that following the final syllable.